Dr. Phillips, welcome back. Um, Unfortunately, we have been experiencing blackouts throughout the day, even after the episode. It's been going on and off. So hopefully, inshallah, now if anyone is listening, don't take the electricity out. But I believe we were discussing what were we discussing? It's I guess what I was asking, what I remember the last time that I was asking, it's what is IOU doing that the government or UTG is not doing, and where do you see potentially IOU getting to?
Well, Bismillah wa salatu wa salam wa Rasulillah. The IOU, when we talked about it earlier, we spoke about the pilot project for Africa, where learning centers would be set up at different points in the various provinces to make higher education accessible to the rural communities. And we are the first to do this for higher education. Of course, there are schools which are up to grade 12 have been built in all of the regions. But higher education, beyond that, there is nothing. It's a blank. So what IOU is offering is access to higher education. And we were keen to collaborate with the government. We have the expertise, we have the experience, and we've been doing it for a number of years now, basically 14 years, this is the 14th year. And also the reality, the continental reality, especially south of the Sahara, is that we only have 6% or less than 6% of our high school graduates get to university. Less than 6%. The global average is 26%. Africa in particular is less than 6%.
That's interesting.
Yeah. We have the lowest in the world. And the United Nations UNESCO have already pointed out that the difference between the developed countries and the underdeveloped countries is education. Simple as that. No rocket science to figure out the details. No, it's as simple as that, education. And reality is that even if the government wakes up and says, yeah, it's education, we need to do something. Can they build enough universities, physical universities, to fulfill the needs of the country? It can't be done anywhere.
That's a heavy task.
Can't do it. Just impossible. The only way forward is online education. It's as simple as that. But as we spoke earlier about the realization, where many of the countries have looked at online studies as being scams, degree mills, just trapping people, pay money, get degrees, and, you've gotten nothing.
Yeah.
So that left the administrative bodies, educational administrative bodies in most of the countries in Africa, skeptical about anything. Once you mention online, they don't want to hear it. Their ears are plugged. Finish. Of course, COVID, we mentioned that earlier, COVID woke them up. Because all of a sudden, the only way that they could teach their students during the COVID period was online. No other options.
Yeah.
So that cracked that nut. That just was so hard to crack. In 1 year, COVID woke people up. So alhamdulillah, there is a growing awareness, but not enough bodies engaged in filling the gap. So what we are doing is filling the gap. For us, it's not really a gap. We've been doing it all along. So we have teamed up with the government. I mentioned to you earlier about teaming up with the College of Education, right? So we are ready to team up in a variety of other similar projects to make higher education accessible to the populations, the young populations, the youngest population in the world. The number of young people in Africa is higher than any other country in the world.
That is a fact. That is a fact. And Gambia in particular has, and Gambia in particular has, in the sub-region, we do have the youngest population. We had a doctor here recently. He pointed that out, that Gambia is kind of unique in the sub-region here. I think he said about 60 to 70% of the Gambian population is below 20, but if you look at the sub-region, we are not the most educated country as well, and it's evident because the infrastructure is not there. We have one university, and the university can be only found in the combos. So if anyone is in Basse or Soma or Farafenni, you would have to move to the combos. And there's a lot of challenges that comes with that as well. Accommodation, transportation. There's so many challenges. So from where I stand, the solution is definitely online, because that is you taking the education now to them instead of them coming to get the education somewhere. So that is that's a good initiative and with IOU, and partnership is definitely the way forward. Like you said, the government cannot do it all, and we had that discussion recently with a doctor here as well. So many sectors in the Gambia do need to be privatized in partnership with the government, because if the government say, okay, we're going to do all of this, it's a heavy burden. I mean, they've tried it in the 1980s, I believe, where the government was subsidizing for almost everything that regarding Gambians, and it couldn't work, and they needed a loan. And I think the World Bank, there was a condition that they cannot subsidize for the citizens. They need to privatize for them to get that loan. And it's evident now that we do need more institutions like IOU, not just IOU, but the infrastructure itself. Because if you want to implement IOU, say in the rural areas, there's also challenges that are going to be faced. That's electricity, internet, just, I guess, a community that is viable enough to have that set up there.
But I would add also that actually the government did tackle this years ago. They did build centers in all of the major regions. They built centers which they call for continuing education.
The Gambian government?
Yes, they're there. But what happened is that there was no follow-up. They built them brand new, set them up, and people didn't use them. They were closed most of the time. People eventually started to connect up to the electricity lines that they had, because it had computers, it had, all these things inside of them.
Why do you think that is? Why do you think it was not utilized the way it was intended to be utilized?
Why was it abandoned? It wasn't a question of even, the common people broke in and then started to utilize the electrical network, etc. And eventually the places just were turned into ruins. You have centers across the country like that.
Does it have something to do with poor management, in your opinion?
Power management?
Poor management.
Poor management. Probably. Probably that would be a big part of it. But to me, the most obvious thing is that there was no follow-up because they went far enough to actually build them. Mm-hmm. And I've heard also from different projects that are, putting up schools in different parts of the country that where they have computer labs, because there's no follow-up with the computer labs, in these centers, learning centers type school connected with schools, the administration has just closed up the computers, put them in closets, and removed the networking, etc., and just turned them into regular, places for either the staff to have, they can have coffee or whatever in there, or it becomes a room for student meetings or whatever. Why?
Yeah, that's a question to ask.
Yeah.
In my view, I think there's also a lack of sensitizing the populace there to understand the value of what they're installing. Because I remember there was a time where someone paid for me to take a course in computer studies. I was in primary school then. And then I came home and I told my brother, oh, someone paid for me to take a course in computer science. And then he was like, you could have brought that money in and we utilize it. Why are you paying and going to any institution when you can just go online and get it? So the reason why I'm using this example is because there's a lack of understanding of valuing education, especially going to a place to get that education, right? And I think in the rural areas especially, the reason why a lot of parents do not take their kids to school because they don't see the value in it. And if you grow up in an environment like that, you don't see the value in going and getting an education in, say, like an institute that was built by the government, or if IOU goes there. So the other aspect is you do have to sensitize the people there and make them understand the value of what it is that you're bringing in. Maybe this is one of the reasons why there was no follow-up, or maybe it didn't work out. Because if you're giving me a Bugatti and I don't know the value of a Bugatti, I'm just going to look at it as any other piece of car. So there needs to be a re-education, what is the word? So I'm bringing this up to ask you a follow-up question. Like, if IOE is going to be in, say, Basse or Soma or Farafenni, what are you guys going to be doing differently to try and entice people to come?
Well, we have set up in Soma. Mm-hmm. Soma is functioning fully.
How are you guys able to get people to be interested?
We only had to reach out to the various schools and get information from the schools, the graduates, and inform them, call them up, let them know this is happening, this is being set up. And with that, the center is full.
Okay.
Because they could obviously see the value. And besides that, there were a number of them that until we set up the setup in Soma, they were coming down to Banjul themselves.
Mm-hmm.
They were coming down to Banjul. They had family members here, whatever. They could come and stay there. And they studied with IOU. So they were already doing that. So this just saved them having to do that. So the word spread, because all the graduates that came out from grade 12 every year after year after year after year, where did they go?
Mm-hmm.
Now they're corpses in the Mediterranean.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Unfortunate. So speaking of higher education, this is the field that you guys are putting the most effort in. But how about, say, high school? Because in 2022, out of 13,000, I believe, candidates 15,360 candidates that took the WAEC exams, only 605 passed. So about 70% failed. This is alarming.
And this is the product of an old system of taking high school graduates, putting them in teachers' college for 2 years, and then putting them back into the schools.
So that's a cycle.
So that was fine initially when you didn't have teachers.
Mm-hmm.
So you were able to get your teachers from there. But now once they stayed year after year after year doing the same thing, the standard of what was being taught now was lower and lower, with more students coming in, and the teachers themselves not upgrading their knowledge, relying on whatever they did last year or the year before, the notes they had, etc. So the quality of the education deteriorated.
Mm-hmm.
And those statistics are the product. Now, the government could see this coming, right? From years before, they could see it. Those that were doing statistics and, looking at the data, etc., they could see it coming, the drop. It was already on the decline.
Yeah.
So they knew it was going to come to that point.
Mm-hmm.
But they didn't have any option. We presented an option to them. I spoke with the heads of the higher, lower and basic education at the time, and they agreed with what I proposed with regards to providing another 2-year program from our bachelor's degree in education, which would give those who are in school an upgrade.
Mm-hmm.
They now became bachelors in those fields. With the ministry suggested to us particular subjects to focus on. So we focused on these as part of the program for completing the bachelor's. And we have masters also in education. And this, again, many of those teachers, if they finish the bachelor's, they're going on to the master's, And those that have been there already who had bachelor's is a chance to upgrade their qualifications. And that's what needs to be there, because you can't take everybody out of school and put them back in school again, because who's going to teach the students?
Right.
So they have to be able to continue and at the same time study online. That doesn't disrupt their commitment to teaching offline in the classrooms.
Mm-hmm.
So we initiated that, and alhamdulillah, it's been very successful. We have, quite a few teachers, or they call them really unqualified teachers, or half qualified teachers, who have signed up with us or studying with us. In our recent graduation, we had, I think about half of our students were graduates from the Teachers College project.
That's
So,
interesting.
So we need to expand that into other areas where there's a need to upgrade the standards of other specialists in various other areas, whether it's agriculture. That's why we also prepared a course in agricultural economics, and because agriculture is one thing, knowing what to do in planting and all the other things that are connected to it. But agricultural economics, teaches you how to market that at the end of it. Because that's what Africa is suffering from.
Mm-hmm.
They're not suffering from farmers who are farming the land, but the process that they use for preparing the products for sale and the access that they have to the markets, the global markets, is cut off because there's so many people in between.
Mm-hmm.
They don't know the economics of it.
Mm-hmm.
So they're being ripped off. West Africa is producing, of cocoa.
Yeah.
It's more than 50% of the world's cocoa is being produced in West Africa.
Yeah.
But you wouldn't know it
Yeah.
from the situation which exists in the countries of the West Africa.
Mm-hmm.
So we started to offer agricultural economics, but for the most part, young people in rural areas, they don't really want to be on the farm. They've seen the glitter of Banjul, and that's where everybody is headed.
Yeah.
So the only way that this can be resolved is if the government offers scholarships and guaranteed jobs.
Yeah.
That's how you do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because what's sending people across the Mediterranean? To get that buck.
Yeah.
Or franc or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
So unless the government is able to provide an alternative, then they're going to continue.
They will not come.
route.
They will not come back. Yeah, I mean that is something that we're suffering. We recently had another guest. He's a professor in the university, and he did mention what you just said. You have experts in agriculture. You have experts in so many different fields, but if there's nothing for them here, they can't utilize the skill set that they've, that they've acquired outside. So there's no incentive for that makes sense for them to come back and do this. So there's a lot on the government side that needs to be done.
Well, the areas that need to be focused on are the ones where the greatest need that the country has is fulfilled.
Mm-hmm.
Because what tends to happen is that many of the established universities, they focus on the biggest demands, specializations in the West.
Mm-hmm.
So they will go into robotics and, all these very, fancy areas that glitter and, so-and-so made it to this head and became head of that and billions and millions and all these other things. So people tend to gravitate towards that. But the government needs to present an alternative. We need the citizens to specialize in these areas which are necessary to build up the country.
Yeah.
Now TVET is being echoed often, to get technical training, to develop technical training schools. But, actually it's quite expensive to bring big machines down, etc., to train people, etc. But it has to be done, because not everybody can go into the higher areas of education, whether it's medicine and engineering and these other areas. But at least the basic areas that the countries need, the African countries need, the basic areas, then this knowledge, this education should be accessible to them, should be made accessible to them. And that takes us back to the online approach to higher education, where you don't need, at this point, you don't need hands-on. So it's the subjects which you can get by without the hands-on, IT. That's why in the International Open University, based in Canifing, this is the headquarters, we have focused on the subjects which are of the most need in society, in African, developing country. We're focused in these areas, and alhamdulillah, we've made progress, but we need to have the support and the backing of the government for it to be really beneficial to the society on a much higher level. And last year, we gave 1,000 scholarships, to Gambians, through the president of the country, and alhamdulillah, it was welcomed, etc. But even utilizing those 1,000 scholarships, still things are moving very slow for people to get on board and get the benefit from it and be able to get out and benefit the society. So
out of those 1,000 scholarships, how many were grabbed? How many people?
So far, I'm not certain of the details, but it's quite small.
It's quite small.
It's quite small, and we try to set up, vetting arrangements so that people don't come in and grab it who are themselves capable of paying and studying, because the tendency is that for people who have access, they share it with their cousins and their relatives and so and so. There's a tendency to want to do that, doing favors for others, etc. But the people who really need it, it needs to be done systematically. People need to be chosen from the various areas and brought in. The scholarship is there. The setting up of the centers have to come along with it, because we, as a university, we cannot financially take on the setting up of centers in all the 7 regions. The government needs to do that. We provide the scholarship. The government should provide those same places that they set up and which have fallen into ruin. They can be renovated and upgraded and be utilized. But it needs follow up.
Is that something you've proposed to the government to utilize those centers?
Yes.
How was that? What is that?
Well, it was agreed that yes, this is a possibility. Should be done.
But it's not.
Could be done. Yet. But would be done.
Should be.
Would be. That's another story.
That's another story. When it comes to scholarship and it going scholarships and the government, it's quite hard to access those scholarships, and it's not just IOU issue. There's also there tends to be some sort of favoritism within the government itself, especially people that have access to these scholarships. Most of the people that get these scholarships are usually family members or friends of families or friends of friends of friends of friends. There's not a lot of awareness, but it's also to get them. It's quite hard because I've applied several times, and I know countries do give Gambian a lot of scholarships, like China, Malaysia, Singapore. There's a lot of scholarships that come through the Gambia, but it's not a lot of people that get these scholarships. Is there a way where these scholarships could be given directly to individuals? Because you're saying the fear is you want the scholarships to go to people that deserve it, not people that could actually afford it. But it's quite hard to filter that out, because on the other hand, the government has these scholarships, but people don't have access to them, because you're saying there's a low number of people that have applied for this or have gotten these scholarships. But then again, we know there's a need for it, and it's there, no one is getting it. How can you balance that out to try and maybe IOU could do something proactive?
Well, we do it.
So people could apply scholarships.
Yeah, they can go directly to IOU, and we do provide scholarships for people who walk in, and explain their circumstances, and we verify that such and such are among the needy, etc., and we give them the scholarships.
What are some of the criteria you guys look at to grant scholarships to people that apply?
Financial means, the people, if they have the financial means to look after themselves, provide themselves with, higher levels of the necessities for living comfortably, etc. We try to weed them out and take on the people who are living under dire circumstances. And if it means even going to their homes, meeting the parents or whatever, checking it out. We do as much as we can.
Yeah.
And the government needs to really step up and finish that off,
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, they are trying. It's just a lot of work that still needs to be done.
There's priorities.
Yeah.
The issue of priorities, there are issues that the government is faced with that it sets as priorities that they have to do, etc. And, that's reality.
But the argument is education should be a priority because we are seeing how the country is turning into. And like you were saying, the difference between developed countries and underdeveloped countries, it's the differentiating factor is education. So if we want to get to that level, education should be at the forefront of our achievements. And I think that there needs to be advocacy for that and a little bit of a push, especially in the Ministry of Education here. So you guys do vetting. How about high school results? Is there any requirements like A's or B's like your previous high school result, or do you guys just take anyone?
Well, if the person gets results which would get them into UTG,
okay,
right? If that's enough to get them in, then that's enough for us.
So UTG standard is what?
Yeah, the basic. Yeah.
Okay, because I know there are. Then again, if we look at the WIC system, it's so outdated. There's some students that it's hard, right, to pass these exams because of the nature of how the examination is structured. So sometimes they tend to fail. It doesn't necessarily mean that if there was a better educational system, they wouldn't do well. But because of the nature of WIC, I passed through that. I think it's just, it's a little bit ridiculous, if you ask me. If you look at the alternative, which is the IGCSE, it's quite modern. It's quite applicable in modern day society. It's not so archaic. There's a lot of flexibilities. There's a practical aspect of it. It's not only theoretical and like the way WIC is. And if you look at students, they usually transition from WIC and go to IGCSE. They tend to do really, really, really well. And I think Derry is one of those guys that transitioned. So there's a clear difference between WIC and, say, IGCSE. And my problem is if students do not do well in WIC, it doesn't necessarily mean they don't deserve the chance to go to university simply because of what they are getting out of the examination. Because the exam itself is not being looked at. So is there maybe some sort of a reform that IOU might do to look into these issues, putting into consideration the nature of the WIC examination itself?
Well, that's a big task. It's a big task in and of itself, where the exams have to be re-examined and reconstituted so that they properly represent the latest developments in educational methodologies, etc. So that is something beyond our scope and our ability, because the university is, though it's global, it has students from all over the world, over 200 countries. Still it's still in its early stages of development. So we wouldn't be able to take on a task like that. That's government level that they need to step in, because like in Malaysia, what they've done is that they've developed this system of what they call micro credentials. Where people who, after leaving school, gone into the workforce and have worked for a period of time, 10 years, something like this, they go and look at what type of work they were doing, and they give them some university credit for what they have done. So this is recognition of prior learning, but they've learned on the job, and you can add up your credits this way and that way, and it can help you get into the system. Sometimes you can get in on the bachelor's level. Some have even brought people in on the master's level. So maybe the country needs to consider that methodology, to look into this practice in Malaysia, because their educational system is recognized, world recognized system. Their universities are among, the higher third of universities globally. So it may be worth looking into that.
This will be on a government level.
Yeah, because that has to be, especially, that system has to be applied by the government, recognized, accepted, and then it can be implemented through the NACA and other bodies that vet students.
Okay. Because the reason why I'm asking, I do know a few people that did not do well in the WAEC exams, but just knowing them on a personal level, they're quite smart. It's just, unfortunately, the system that's in place is not so flexible. It's very rigid still. And in my former high school, they do have this entry exam that you do if you're coming from another school. Irregardless of how well you're doing in that school, they have like a standard exam or like a test that they give you to determine if there's a place for you there or not. So this is more of me like suggesting maybe there will be some kind of a test, irregardless of what your WAEC result is or what a UTG is, setting as a standard. Like you could have some kind of an entry level exam to give a second chance to people that do not that do not have the pass mark to enter UTG. But maybe there's an alternative, like a second chance test that would determine if...
But IOU cannot do that on its own.
It can't?
No. This has to be NACA approved.
Okay.
So if NACA approves the system, and NACA, alhamdulillah, we have put NACA in contact with the accrediting body of Malaysia. That's it's called the MQA, I think, yeah. And we've put them together. They've dialogued, and they're going to be doing a memorandum of understanding agreement between them, where this knowledge can be shared and these practices can be shared, that hopefully they can be implemented here also.
Okay. So you're saying you are not allowed to take students that do not meet the pass mark?
Yeah, not allowed. That's global standard. The global standard is that the students have to reach the pass mark necessary to get into university for them to get into university. If the university requirements are this much, all students in that country have to fulfill those requirements. Now, the issue of prior learning, or additional learning being recognized by a university, as I said, this is being applied. It's in the States. It's being applied in Malaysia, and some other countries are also applying this. It's needed here. It's a possible option to help those students who didn't maybe from years before, they didn't reach the level which would have put them in the system, but they've worked, and the field that they're looking to get into, they have been practically trained for that field, and they've been utilizing that training for so many years, they can give value to it, credit value, university credit value to it, and get them into their programs. It's possible. As I said, it's being done in different countries around the world.
Because, I mean, if you look at the state of the country right now, crime is on the rise. And if you look at the data on education is going down. It's like, if you look at the stat, they're doing this, basically. Crime is going up, education is going down. And I go out, so I interact with some of these boys and people that are just out there. And there's a level of frustration that's happening. Because it's if you fail high school, there's a societal pressure that makes you feel like your life is over. It's done. Like there's nothing else that you can do. And people have tried to retake the exam, but to no avail. They could not pass it again. And that do create frustration, especially in the younger populace, where they tend to distract themselves with drugs and alcohol and so many other things. So if there's not a system that would give a second chance to people that did not do well in high school on the education side, it's a problem.
Sure.
This is just my observation from what I've noticed. And I guess NACA do have that is something that we would have to discuss again and maybe try to get someone from there to point these things out. So what do you want to leave behind? Like, what kind of legacy do you want to leave behind?
Well, in general, the approach that we have taken for all of our subjects, I mean, obviously for Sharia, it's Islamic. The Arabic, it's Islamic connected. But all of the other courses, whether education, psychology, Islamic banking and finance, or business administration, etc., all of these courses are taught from an Islamic perspective. That there is it's a comparative study. Though the university is open to both Muslims and non-Muslims, we don't have any restrictions that only Muslims are allowed in, etc. No.
Thank you for clarifying that. I forgot to mention.
Yeah.
Ask.
It's
open.
It's open.
Yeah, it's not a...
Yeah. So what is being presented is, in any given field, what is normally taught all around the world. That is being taught, but it is taught critically. Not just blindly teaching whatever is there. So whatever is taught is looked at from the Islamic scale. Is this acceptable or is it not? Because Islam is infused in all areas of life. For some people, religion is just on Sunday. We have Muslims also who religion is just on Friday, and whereas what it's supposed to be, it's supposed to be a way of life. That's why we have 5 times daily prayer.
Yeah.
To ground people, connect people, with the guidance of God throughout their lives. So any given subject, even for example, business administration, normally when you're studying marketing, the instructor will inform the students that they should strive to emulate the best marketing specialist who is known to be the best because he is able to sell snowballs to the Eskimos. You understand?
Yeah.
That you're definitely the best. If you're able to sell snowballs to the Eskimos, or sand to the desert Arabs, the people who live in sand, and you're able to sell them a handful of sand, you definitely are Mr. Number One.
Yeah.
But, from an Islamic position, The reality is that the only way you are able to sell sand to an Arab on the desert, a Bedouin, or snowballs to an Eskimo living in snow, you have to deceive him.
Yeah.
You have to deceive him.
Definitely.
You know?
Yeah.
So, you get caught up in, one phrase which people mentioned to me here, first time I heard it when I came to West Africa here, people said that, the mentality is that the white man's ice is always colder. you know, this is that encapsulates, encapsulates the concept.
Yeah.
That's how it's looked at.
Yeah.
You've been indoctrinated.
You've been indoctrinated.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Reality is something else, but you've been indoctrinated. So it's that kind of deception. From Islamic perspective, this is forbidden. Deception in trade, etc., or elsewhere is not allowed.
Yeah.
So the one who's teaching business administration, marketing, makes that clear. Yeah, people say this, but if in order for you to sell something, you have to deceive your customer. And you see, this is where now preparing of billboards and all these things, people specialize in
market
things,
psychology.
Yeah, they're working people.
They understand the minds, how people think, and they
play on their desires, play on their needs, play on this. So
this is something you guys make
sure that the students understand that though this is the standard, or though this is commonly said or promoted, it is from an Islamic perspective not acceptable, because you are deceiving people. As the Prophet ﷺ himself had said, that those who cheat us, man ghashana falaysa minna, they are not from us, not from the true body of Muslims. So that is the approach that we've taken in all of our subjects. So this is something unique, which you won't find it in any university that teaches multiple subjects. Yes, if you go to Islamic university, you'll find it, which they have in the country. They've set up Islamic university, but this was specific for Islamic subjects. But to study business administration, IT, banking and finance, etc., you don't find it. So this is what we have sought to establish within all of our courses, and we are presenting this to the Gambia, and from the Gambia to the rest of the world.
So in essence, it's like you guys are weeding out these corrupt elements of curriculums, say business administration, for example. The standard is deception, is part of it, market psychology. Maybe they might not
put it in nice words.
Exactly. Give it like very, very nice words. So this is something that you guys identify and try to take out of and present it in its pure form.
And what that is basically is bringing morality back into the classroom.
Yeah.
Because this is what the West was known for, taking morality out of the classroom.
Yeah.
They're saying it should what they were saying was taking religion out of the classroom. But the religion was where the moral principles were being held and taught from.
Agreed.
So in removing that, then secularization of education, then that just opened the door for all of this. So we tried to bring religion back into the classroom, not trying to push it down anybody's throat, but for them to understand, what issues are going on here, and what is pleasing to God and what is not.
We do struggle sometimes on how we conduct our business, because we do understand that's the norm. The norm here is deception, especially in the marketing communities. And we are not a marketing firm per se, but we do a lot of social media marketing and social media management for businesses. And my fear is always deception. But sometimes there's a fine line between, being honest, and I, it's almost like you're doing things that you don't even realize that you're doing until you sit down and just reanalyze and look at it from an Islamic lens. Then you realize, oh, you are participating in a system that is un-Islamic. We do struggle from that sometimes, and it keeps me up at night, and that's why sometimes it's just hard for me to um, even do certain things, because the market is it's so secular that if you're coming from um, if you're conducting yourself in an Islamic manner, not in its literal form, but your business is coming through an Islamic channel, it's quite hard to compete here. So there's a challenge there, but I guess with IOU, hopefully over time, we will get people that go into the market that are coming from an Islamic lens or doing things from an Islamic lens, which is like I've never heard of what IOU is doing, especially at the core of it is Islamic principles, even with all the other courses that you guys are giving out. I've never heard that, to be honest, and I think for one, I am vetting for IOU. I've seen some of the things that I've gone through the website, and I've seen some of the things that are offered, and it's not something that's here, and it's something that's really, really needed. So basically, your legacy is to have an institution that would
be a model.
Would be
a model for other institutions to follow, because obviously we can't fulfill the needs of the whole globe.
Right.
We try to at least do as much as we can within the scope that's open to us.
Mm-hmm.
But the approach, the way, to try to set that good path
Mm-hmm.
that the Prophet ﷺ told us to, follow that good path, because, that's the blessed path, and all who follow it, you get the reward from their rewards.
Mm-hmm.
We leave behind something which benefits society as a whole, and not just individuals, accumulating and amassing wealth for themselves,
Mm-hmm.
but something which gives back to the society and helps the society rise up together.
Mm-hmm. And at its core, morality.
Yeah.
A moral.
Yeah, and that's what the Prophet ﷺ had said, إِنَّمَا بُعِثْتُ لِأُتَمِّمَ مَكَارِمَ الْأَخْلَاقِ. I was only sent to perfect for human society the highest of moral character traits,
Mm-hmm.
morality. That he summed up the religion in terms of morality.
Mm-hmm.
Morality, whether it's morality with regards to human beings and God, or morality with regards to human beings and other human beings, or morality with regards to human beings and the world in which we live.
Mm-hmm.
So, either you're worshiping God alone, that's what's morally good,
Mm-hmm.
or you're worshiping others besides God, even though you might call them God and things like this, but they're not God,
Mm-hmm.
Then that is morally bad.
Mm-hmm.
When you are kind and supportive and gentle with your fellow human beings, that's morally good. When you steal their wealth and, stab them in the back and all these other kinds of things, then that's morally bad.
Yeah.
And then environment, the environment, the world that we're in. We're tearing down forests and, burning down green areas of the world which provide the oxygen for us. And the results with all the climate calamities that are going on around the world, that's morally bad.
Mm-hmm.
What's happening there, and it's morally good to look after this world
Mm-hmm.
and leave it better than we found it.
Mm-hmm. I want to segue into a topic that for me personally, it's quite disturbing, especially hoping to one day have kids in this world that we live in, and that is the phenomenon that we see in the West, which is the gender dysphoria issue. I don't know if you're familiar with it.
LGBTQ.
The LGBTQ community, and where people are non-binary, and there's a push that's trying to push it through mainstream media, through social media, through human rights activism, through so many different channels that for some reason I think Gambians or people in the sub-region generally are not thinking or trying to be aware of this, because
even the terminology, you know, for example, non-binary.
Yeah.
If you say that to the average person in the street, you know, they say, "What in the world is that?"
Exactly.
You know, but you hear it's being used and it's being pushed and everything. Okay, if you're in the West, yeah, you're updated, you understand all of these things. You know, but for the rest of the world as a whole, you know, this is meaningless. This terminology is meaningless. So I believe that the mass of the people in the world will not absorb this. It will find its place in areas of the world, especially the Western influenced areas of the world, but they're the minority. You know, the so-called third world or developing world, they don't have time for that. You know, there are other concerns which are far greater, you know, than, you know, having one bathroom for both males and females, and, you know, all these kinds of things, you know, which doesn't make sense in the developing world, where they've found some necessary standards to make the distinction between male and female. You know, they don't have problem with that. That's really a Western problem. You know, when you have made so many things permissible and acceptable, etc., you're just looking for things now. You know, what can I dig up? What new point can I raise? And you know, so
because the reason why I'm so concerned about this, it's maybe for someone like me, or you know, around my age bracket and then upwards, it's not something that's so concerning. But my worry is the people that are consuming social media, which are the kids. Because if you're in a society where morality is not being, you know, their foundation is not based on morality, and they're just consuming everything. Basically, the door is open, and they're just consuming all these things. My worry is these kids that are consuming these informations, because they might not, they are familiar with the terms non-binary. They are looking at other kids in the West that are claiming to be non-binary, or they feel like a female.
Okay, but you're mentioning this term in our podcast here, non-binary. What does that mean?
So a non-binary basically says they do not conform to the gender norms. So they are neither male nor female. They are something else.
Yeah. So binary means you believe in male and female.
Yeah.
Non-binary means that, you know, these are not fixed realities.
Yes.
That you can have half and half and 3/4 and 2/4 and one quarter. Yeah, you're neither male nor female.
And their argument is, because sociology is being taught in our schools, in our universities, their argument is gender and sex, they're different. Gender is biology. I mean, sex is biology, but gender is a social construct. And their claim is it's mutually exclusive, and it's not inclusive. So gender can be anything. Gender is fluid. Gender do not have to be a male or a female. Sex, biologically speaking, it is a fact that there's male X and X chromosomes and X and Y chromosomes, but gender is a social construct. You don't have to conform to your biological sex. And there's a strong argument in sociology, and people from UTG, they could give you that argument. But my argument is, in Islam, the idea of gender being a social construct. Do you have any comment from an Islamic point of view? Is that something that's in Islam, or something that's a, how can I put it?
It's a norm that the world has been functioning for since human beings first came on this earth.
Yeah.
You know, the whole world has been functioning from all parts of the world, you know, with this norm. And it's only in the last 25 years that this thing has popped up. That's the reality. This is something which has just popped up now.
It's new.
You know, Yeah, it's new. And it goes against the understanding of billions of people.
Non-Muslims, there's everybody. So, but the problem is this. The problem is the movement is powerful because they do have resources. And their target is not us. Their target is not people that are rational. Their target is the kids whose brains are very malleable.
I've seen some of their advertisements where they say, you know, we're coming to get your kids.
Kids, yeah, we're queer, we're here, we're coming for your children, like those kind of chants. And, you know, to me, it's worrying. To me, it's very, very worrying.
It's war.
And
it's
you know, I don't want to be in this paranoia state all the time. You know, because I'm worried I want to have kids at some point, and they're going to be in this world of.
Well, that's why we have to play, you know, a greater role in terms of bringing morality back into the classroom.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because the standard moral norms, they are all over the earth, mm-hmm. not restricted only to Islam, mm-hmm. but all religions, you know, have a norm which is accepted by other religions, etc., around the world. You know, there are some elements of it which may differ, you know, and that's why I said we have it clearly defined in terms of the norms with regards to God, norms with regards to other human beings, and norms with regards to the world in which we live. Mm-hmm. You know, these are the three areas where morality has to be reestablished because of the secularist movement, which has broken down the barriers and the doors and turned everything into chaos. Mm-hmm. So as long as you're working towards that, you support schools which are, you know, binary. You know, this is their commitment.
Yeah.
You know, so you support those kinds of schools. You put your kids in the kinds. You encourage other people to understand this and make that commitment for themselves. Then, you know, eventually the wave will overcome this blip, where it's a blip on the screen. You know, it was not there anywhere before. It just popped up.
And it's spreading.
And it's spreading for a while. Yeah. But, you know, that's the nature of trends, isn't it? They become popular for a while. They're out there and people are, yeah. And then after some time, it dies off.
So you do think this is just another trend that would eventually die off?
Yeah.
Why do you think that is?
Because of the history of human civilization. Mm-hmm. Do you think this is the first time this idea has ever been proposed?
I mean, you know,
we don't have historical record to identify, but I don't have doubt that it may have popped up in the past sometime, somewhere, etc. Mm-hmm. You know, we're not reinventing the wheel. You know, we're not. There's nothing new under the sun, as they say. You know, it's been there. Mm-hmm. When Sodom and Gomorrah of the past, you know, history, biblical history, you know, the prophet Lot or Lut in Arabic, well, that's what he was dealing with. He was dealing with elements of it from how many thousands of years before. Yeah. But did it dominate the whole world? No, it didn't. There's a part of the world yet. It did gain footing and created havoc, etc. But then the society eventually swallowed it and went on. Mm-hmm. You know, but satanic in its origin, because who would come up with that idea besides Satan?
Yeah.
You know, it's satanic in its origin, and Satan is busy.
Yeah.
You know, he keeps operating, keep trying here this way. It doesn't work here, we'll try this one. If it doesn't work there, try that one. And eventually he finds somebody that takes it on and pumps it up and promotes it, and there are people who will accept it for a while, etc. But the flow of human history will engulf it, and it will carry on, will not be dominated by it, because it is destructive in and of itself.
It really is.
Because homosexuality, lesbianism, homosexuality has no real
social benefit.
Not only social benefit, but it will not produce the people who will people the earth.
Succeed, basically.
Yeah.
There's no
it will
success.
die at it because it can't produce.
Yeah.
It's like I think it's Mugabe or something like this, who said something about that okay, you bring me a case where two men can can produce a child, and okay, yeah, it's fine.
Then yeah.
If you can have, so that's the reality.
Yeah, I think we've just kind of been distracted a little bit on fundamental realities, and this happens in societies where they are comfortable. If things are fine, the structures are infrastructure.
They're looking for other areas to dilly-dally with.
Yeah, I mean that do kind of calms me down a little bit with my paranoia. My only worry is now they have social media, which is an extremely powerful tool. The reach is more than before. They can reach the whole globe from a single spot. So that's another thing that's, if you look at it that way as a trend, which would eventually go down, then there's not much to worry about. It's just to be aware. If you're not aware of what's out there, you wouldn't know what your kids are consuming. And I know I read a quote recently that says, you're not opening your kids to the world. No, you're not opening the world to your kids. You're opening your kids to your world by allowing them to be on social media, especially at a certain age. The advent like with TikTok and Instagram and some of these social media platforms, which, I'm still young, but I don't even know what's happening there. And kids are there. These are platforms where they feel more inclined towards. And if you look at what they're looking at, it's crazy, and it's just to raise awareness. I think this is something we need to start including in our discourse, for parents to understand.
But it should be worked into the whole educational system.
I agree.
We can't afford, we can't afford not to be engaged.
Yeah.
We're just going on as if nothing else is happening. We should be conscious of these different trends.
Yeah.
And from the youngest of ages, we give them the understanding which will protect them from that element that is attacking our societies.
Yeah.
Because they're going for the kids. As they said, they're going for the kids.
That's the target.
Yeah. But, ultimately, I do believe that common sense,
trumps everything else.
Will, with the help of God, will help people to get past this point. And as you said, it's limited right now only to, for the most part, only to the advanced countries. It's just like suicide, for example. Suicide is massive.
Yeah.
One of the third biggest killers in America. It kills people. Suicide, suicide. But in the developing world,
they don't have time for that.
No, suicide is not considered. Who's going to commit suicide? Just insane.
Yeah.
So it becomes popular in those areas where, people, due to the stress and etc., get into depression, and all these kind of things affect them. Things which would not affect people in the developing world. But in the developed world, it affects them. So Japan, the rate of suicide has just skyrocketed.
Yeah.
Even though the society is quite modern, quite developed, etc. USA, same thing. So these are temporary trends, which when we plan our way forward, we have to keep them in mind. But the alternative is there. It's not something that we have to go rocket science to reach the point of being able to deal with. It's fairly simple to deal with. if we're conscious. If we're not conscious of what's going on, then it can catch us without us realizing it.
And that is the exact point that I'm trying to make. It's just to be aware, to be conscious of these things that are out there. Because if you ask a lot of parents what is non-binary, like you said earlier, they wouldn't know what you're talking about. It's just, they would think it's some made-up words. But if you ask kids what is non-binary, they can tell you what non-binary means. So they are aware. But kids do not understand what it is.
The implications.
Yeah, exactly. They don't understand.
It's just a new word which people are using, and it seems to be a buzzword. And
exactly.
So do you want to be hip? You want to be up to date? Along with the movement.
Exactly.
Then you need to know and use these words. These words that drop from your mouth. Any chance you get.
Yeah, exactly. And it's coming through the movies that we are watching. Interesting enough, there's certain corporations in the US. One of them is called ESG, I believe. The other one is called, what is it called? Something Vanguard, I believe. They usually set a standard for companies in the name of being inclusive. For like movies, for example, there are certain rules that should only be for non-binary people or people in the LGBTQ community. Same thing with books, same thing with art advertisements. So basically, everything that a business does, there are certain quotas for people in that community. And if you look at movies right now...
But is that global?
I mean, movies are global.
Movies are global. I'm just saying those who are making the movies, making those blockbusters that are going around the world. I mean, what percentage of the society are engaged in that? It's very limited. Mm-hmm. The rest of the society are struggling just to put clothes on their backs, and food, on the table,
mm-hmm.
So it's a small segment of global society that's caught up in this.
Mm-hmm.
You happen to be in the media, etc., so you are seeing it, coming at society as a whole.
Mm-hmm.
But to me, the people that I am engaged with, etc., in different parts of the world, I don't see them being caught up in it and worried about it. There's so many other things which are far more important. They're not worrying about athletes who have, changed their sex. They were males and now they're females.
Yeah.
And so they're competing against other females and they're beating them out because, they had testosterone, the gene for it, etc. This is very small fragment of human society that's concerned about this and are engaged in that.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that the worry, will just put stress in your life more than
I think
than you need.
I think so. I think it has put tremendous stress. Just worrying about and it's because of what I'm seeing and how it's being pushed. It's very subtle. It's so subtle that parents could sit down and watch movies with their kids and they wouldn't see it.
But the thing is, to me, the problem which Gambian society is faced with right now with the, female genital mutilation.
Oh yeah, that is something I wanted to get into.
That is something far more important.
That is something
than binary and this other foolishness.
That was where I wanted to move. That is the conversation I wanted to move. Thank God you brought that up, because there's a outcry right now because there's a law that it's
banned it in the country.
Exactly, but I'm sure you're aware of that.
Yeah. In fact, I even gave some talks, public talks, regarding it.
Yeah.
When they were initially bringing it up and trying to promote it.
Yeah. And you do have certain Islamic scholars in the country that is advocating for it, for FGM, saying it's Islamic. What's your comment?
Well, my comment from back then, years back when they were first making the effort to try to get it banned, was that it has been allowed. It has been allowed in Islam, but it's not preferable. It is not something preferable because of the harm which comes from it, the potential harm, it not being done under proper medical principles and supervision, etc. So the harm is very clear. The number of girls that suffer and after marriage or when the time comes to deliver a child and these other kinds, the harm far outweighs the permissibility, far outweighs it, But the Prophet, may God's peace and blessing be upon him, it was not done in Mecca. It was not known. It wasn't their practice. When Muslims went to Medina, and of course Islam had started to spread in Medina, and then Muslims joined that community, and then their numbers expanded till leadership was given to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and the general Islamic rule was established there. Islamic government ruling, etc. So he had, when he was asked about it, because there's authentic narrations where he was asked about it, and he had stated that the woman who was practicing it in Medina, he instructed that she should be told to make it very slight, khafifi. She should reduce it to the slightest possible, meaning that what is affecting a woman's pleasure from sexual relations or going to affect her physically so that it affects her ability to urinate properly and these other kinds of things. All these kinds of impacts should be avoided, should be away from. So just as we have male circumcision, because you also have people who are jumping up and saying even male circumcision is, male genital mutilation. Okay, so you've got people who are calling for this too, right? Yeah. So the point is that male genital circumcision, right? Not mutilation, circumcision is not mutilation in that it doesn't affect a man's ability to enjoy what Allah has made permissible for him, etc. So in the same way, it doesn't affect that when it's done for females, it should be similar. It should be so fine, so slight that it doesn't affect. Once it starts to affect, then this is not permissible. Once it starts to affect. Because we don't have a double standard that it's okay for the men not to affect, but for women it's okay. It's okay now to make it affect. It's okay. Anything goes. And we know the consequences in those countries that practice it, whether it's Sudan or wherever across Africa, in Egypt and these places, they're practicing it there also. That there are horrendous cases, things that would bring tears to the eyes of the harshest of people. So it does need to be tackled, and tackled from a medical perspective, where just like you want to have circumcision, you don't do it in your house. Take your child and you're gonna go do it yourself,
of course.
Or get your neighbor. Okay, the neighbor is known to do it, so you're gonna have them come in and do it. No, it's done. We do it in a hospital. That's how it's done now. Of course, in some parts of the world where people don't have access to hospitals and things like this, then they may end up mutilating even the males. It happens.
There are cases.
So in the same way, it needs to be tackled, systematically, medically, with the proper circumstances, where it is under control. And it doesn't end up harming a segment of the society.
Because we've looked at a few debates here, mostly on social media, with Islamic scholars in the local Islamic scholars here, that I think one of the things they're not reconciling with is the reality of the FGM itself. I mean, what they say is Islam allows female genital circumcision, not mutilation. But in practice,
It's mutilation.
it's mutilation.
Yeah.
So it's there's a debate with semantics.
Yeah, but
But we're not.
because the law banned it altogether.
Yeah.
You see, which again, that was gone to another extreme. Because it was something which the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam did permit. So you can't now bring a law in the country which is banning something which the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam himself permitted. The point is to understand how he permitted it and to what degree he permitted it. So that the law doesn't now actually contravene the Islamic law.
So if the data that we are getting is like 85 to 90% of women that have gone through the experience are coming out and saying this is harmful, this has affected us psychologically and physically, and it's not something that we can reverse. It's done, it's finished. And also, if you look at the data that is coming from RVTH, which is the main hospital in Banjul, they're saying even the first level of circumcision that the scholars are, arguing for, that this is what's allowed in Islam, also has medical implications. That's what the data it's shown. So it's not necessarily with what Islam has prescribed. It's the problem of how it's being carried out, the practice, how it's being carried out. Even when they say we're doing it according to the Sunnah, in practice, it's still they go beyond. So yeah. I would.
So that's what has to be dealt with. It has to be dealt with defining what is acceptable according to the Sunnah. What is acceptable according to the Sunnah, where no harm comes to the female, that the surgeons, the specialists, they're the ones that can say, well, if you only do this much, there's no harm. But if it's left up to scholars who are not specialized in this area and don't know how to define or to clarify, etc., they say, well, as long as you do it, in a way which is not harmful, and they're not able to define where the harm comes from,
exactly.
etc., then it becomes a problem.
It becomes
so you're dealing with non-specialists, talking in an area of specialization. That's the point.
Yeah.
So that's where the problem lies. That what is clearly defined in the Sunnah, the Prophet ﷺ, telling the female who was doing it to reduce it to the absolute minimum. They today are not able to define it, and so their concern is that we don't prohibit something. Legally, we add laws now which prohibit something which the Prophet, may God's peace and blessing be upon him, had permitted. Yeah. But, again, if one just goes from the perspective that, hey, we don't have enough hospitals, etc., and people trained enough to do this thing properly, so on, so on, so the easiest thing is just to ban it, because where the harm is greater than the good,
exactly,
then the simplest way to deal with it immediately is just to ban it.
And that's where I come from.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, where the government takes that stance, then it's legitimate stance for them to take until, it can be properly
studied
done.
And you have experts that can actually do it medically through our modern way of doing things. That's where I stand as well, where it's not an attack on Islam or Islamic practices. It's just the harm outweighs the good.
Yeah.
Based on
this
the
is the
evidence
reality.
This is the reality.
This is the reality that people are living.
You can argue, saying this is Islamic, but in practice, it's not Islamic, and that's the majority of people that are coming out.
The point is that when we say it is Islamic, we have to keep in mind those other principles like the usul fiqh, or fundamentals of Islamic legal science, which is that the harm should not outweigh
Good.
the good. So when we're looking at it, it's from Islamic legal perspective, that principle has to be maintained. So where you're unable to ensure that there will not be greater harm than the good, then you have to leave it.
Does it become haram then?
Where the harm is greater than the good, yes, it becomes
Even though
haram.
it's sunnah.
Even though it's sunnah, it's halal in its original form, but where it's in practice, the harm is greater than the good, the society doesn't have a means to ensure, as in male circumcision, that the harm doesn't outweigh the good, then you have to pause it. You have to say, stop now. No, not stop forever,
Yeah.
but stop at this point in time, just to prevent the harm coming on the females of our society, and protecting them is our responsibility. So we don't need to be fighting, with the rule which came out and prohibited it, because this is not a forever ruling. It is given this time where we don't have the means to control it and ensure the safety of what is happening to our females.
Yeah, I'm with you. That's clear. At least this is a clip we can take out and put out there, and some of these people that advocated for it would at least listen to. And we had another guest here who was trying to make sense of how when some of these practices are, we're trying to get rid of them, the way people react to them. And he said it's deeply rooted in during the colonial times, where if a cultural practice is deemed harmful, people would automatically react and be like, the Tuarabs have come again to take away our cultures. So there's like a reaction. There's not like a objective analysis of what's happening. It's almost like we don't care about what you're saying. This is our cultures. This is our practices. So if you want to take that away from us, you're taking something away from our cultures, our cultural practices. And if you think about it, that does make sense. And this is why here in Gambia, we do need a lot of people to kind of come and try to differentiate cultural practices and Islamic practices. In Gambia, it's very, very intertwined. It's almost, there's a lot of people there's so many things that are cultural that they think is Islamic, especially like when it comes to like marriage or naming ceremonies, or even gender roles, for example. They all think, these are coming from Islam. But if you really look at, if you analyze what these are, it's not really from Islam. Some of them are not from Islam. Some of them are.
They're not able to distinguish between cultural Islam and Islamic culture.
Yeah.
This is really the essence of it.
Exactly.
Islamic culture is the culture which comes out of applying Islam. Whereas cultural Islam is the culture of peoples who are Muslims, and they are assuming that simply because this is our culture, it is Islamic. But it may contain Islamic things, and it may not. They're not able to make that distinction. And that's what needs to be done globally. It's not just here in the Gambia, it's all over the Muslim world. Where cultural practices, which didn't have Islamic origins and went against Islamic principles, became a norm which the society embraced, like honor killing, for example, where in order to protect the honor of the family, where a female or a male, engaged in practices which go against Islamic teachings, they'll kill that person. It happens. It is happening. It's harmful to society.
And there's a clear distinction
Between the two. Yeah. I mean, they're thinking that cultural Islam is, in fact, Islamic culture, where, in fact, there is a difference between cultural Islam and Islamic culture. So we have to look at these things from an Islamic cultural perspective, which defines clearly what is acceptable and what isn't. So killing somebody simply because they committed an error or sin which went against the sensitivities or sensibilities of that particular cultural gathering or group, that doesn't make it permissible simply because the culture reacts to that practice. It's not culturally acceptable, but in fact, it doesn't go against true Islamic culture. So that distinction needs to be made in our times, where these practices, which may have been taken for granted over the years, became a norm. They have to be revisited. You can't just say, well, our grandparents and our great-grandparents were doing it and, it worked for them, it's okay for them, and so it should be okay for us.
And that was the argument of the people during the times of the Prophet, where, this is our practices of our forefathers. Why should we change it? But there's also, I guess, a fine line between evolution and the core principles of Islam, because there is an idea where society objectively do change over time, but does Islam change with it, or there are certain aspect of Islam that should stick, that should be the way it is?
Well, those principles, Islamic principles, which address human characteristics, human characteristics which don't change. What Adam and Eve were faced with, we are still faced with today. What was prohibited by Allah, we still face with its prohibition today. So those will never change. Those will be with human beings till the end of this world. Whereas those things which human beings come up with, new things which fall under prohibitions, these may come and go. But there are fundamental issues which have to do with the human psyche, the human nature. These things will be with human beings to the end of this world. We should be able to identify them and isolate them, protect the society from them.
Do you have, can you give a few examples that, me, myself, and some of the viewers can, look at and understand these are fundamental principles that cannot and should not be changed as long as the human race is alive? Do you have a few examples that you can give?
Well, all what they call muharramat, those things which have been clearly forbidden. Alcohol. We don't need to go into a discussion about alcohol, it's forbidden. And all the intoxicants that are connected to it, are also forbidden. There may come times where some societies where people are allowed to do these things, they become a norm and people accept them. And, I know a lot of people from Albania, for example, where they originally were Muslim people, but, alcohol became a norm. So people would pray and they would drink, and they would be drinking alcohol also, I just recently saw on YouTube about, Albanian families that were in Australia from the 1920s, and they came there out of Albania, which had become isolated and had come under Russian rule and all these other kinds of things. And, drinking was a norm. So they drank and they didn't pray. They did practice some of these Muslim practices, whether it's, just praying, on Fridays, or whether it's just, praying during Ramadan or whatever, Ramadan Muslims, we could call them, or Friday Muslims. This had become a norm in this society. But the majority of time, people weren't praying. So this prohibition, they had given up. It was acceptable. It became cultural norm that people did not pray, which is forbidden. To live in that state where you deliberately don't pray 5 times a day, and you consider yourself to be a Muslim.
Yeah.
Because under Russian rule, your card, your identity card, said Muslim. So this is what Muslims did, and that's what you were considered as Muslim. But then when Serbs were killing those who had that Muslim written on their card, then for a lot of people it was a wake-up call here. Why? People who were our neighbors and, we were playing together, enjoying together, etc. All of a sudden, they're now turning and killing us simply because we had that Muslim name on there. It caused people actually, for a number of Albanians and others, from that part of the area, they said for the first time we started to look at Islam. What is Islam really? It became a wake-up call for them to find out what Islam really was.
Yeah, because they've been killed and I don't understand.
Yeah, why?
Simply because they're
had
Muslim.
That name, because they didn't see any difference between themselves and the Serbs and the others that they were living with.
Yeah.
They were doing the same thing they were doing. But so it became, when this became an issue and people were being killed because of it, it caused them to wake up and start to find out what Islam was. They said, so that was a history that had to do with the people of that area, But in terms of the Islamic practices, which they kept, from day one, their communities continued to practice them, whether in those days or in these days, it has to do with fundamental practices, like, for example, as Muslims, we get married, within certain parameters, this, premarital relations are not acceptable. I mean, they may have been drinking alcohol, but when it comes to getting married, it was known that you don't do that. So if somebody from the family did that, this is where you had honor killings and things like that becoming a norm in the society. So to be able to distinguish between what is acceptable Islamically and what is not, I mean, they were just going on cultural, what people did, what my parents did, my grandparents did, and
it's an inheritance. It's an inherited practice that has been infused with Islamic principles.
Some elements, yeah.
Some elements of it.
So, alhamdulillah, from the Serbian massacres of Muslims in Albania and etc., for many, it was a wake-up call for them. They had to now start to question, well, what is this Islam? I'm labeled this label and I don't really even know what makes a person a Muslim, So for many, it was a situation where they were awoken to Islam. what we saw as evil massacres and everything else, they were evil. But for the Albanians and others from that region who were under attack from the Serbs in particular, it was a wake-up call. It was an awakening. They had been in a slumber for
It's almost like
generations.
God's way of waking people up, like wake
Time to wake up.
time to wake up. Another thing that I think we are faced with here, I guess that's also something that's global. It's the idea of evil force, like an evil force, like when you say the Illuminati and how they have such a massive influence in the media and wars and things like that, and they have like a cult type of way of operating. I think the idea that we generally have is, they're maybe in a small room doing blood sacrifice. We're looking for something very superstitious. We're looking for something that's very cultish and fictional. It's like maybe flying people, things like that. And I think to understand what evil force is and how it's influential, it's, for example, like let's look at the Israeli and Palestine conflict, which has not started today, but it is very clear the objective of Israel's, what they want is to basically just wipe out the Palestinians. But if you look at the mainstream media narrative, they have explanations for their actions, and for someone that have no idea what's going on, it sounds rational. But if you look at it from, I guess, maybe like an Islamic point of view, or just from an evil, good point of view, it is
humanitarian.
Yeah, there's a kind of irrationality that's happening. Like it just makes no sense to want to wipe out a whole population.
Well, of course, they don't. Some extremists amongst them will make that kind of statement. We need to wipe them out. They're human animals, and they should just be wiped off the face of the earth. But for the majority, it's a question of survival. Because it's been put to them in that way that we are innocent people just trying to, live a life and have a place to live on this earth. We managed to get it, and we're just trying to protect it. And these, nasty Arabs are trying to wipe us off the face of the earth. So we don't want the repeat of the Holocaust to happen. So that's their justification, etc. But there are many among them who have seen the realities. They've seen how their Arab neighbors and friends or whatever are treated by the system, and it's clear to them that they are being discriminated against, and there's a genocide happening there. So you have many who are demonstrations in the U.S. and elsewhere. You'll have Israeli Jews who are opposed to Zionism. So that word and that, because of social media, etc., it's out there for others to see, to realize, to understand. And so both sides of the narrative are there, though the side of considering the Arabs to be the enemy, seeking to wipe out the Jews, the innocent Jews. That side of the narrative has been promoted on such a scale that for many people, especially in the early stages of this conflict, people thought that it was just the right of self-defense. That's what kept people, kept repeating over and over again. And they, under that right of self-defense, began these acts of genocide.
Yeah. Because some of the footages that's coming out of there, it's just
horrendous.
It's hard to reconcile with. Is there an Islamic explanation or a Quranic explanation for what's happening? Like, was there a prophecy that would, kind of fit in with what's currently happening there?
I don't know of any direct. However, this is not the first time.
Yeah, it goes way back.
The Crusaders took over Jerusalem.
Yeah.
It wasn't the Jews then, it was the Crusaders. Crusaders took over Jerusalem and they massacred the inhabitants of Jerusalem to the point where they were described as riding on their horses up to the knees of the horses in blood and corpses, in the streets of Jerusalem. They took it over for 100 years. And in that 100 years, there was no adhan made over any minaret of any masjid of that land. And it wasn't until Allah raised up Salahuddin that the liberation came. So that was 100 years. So this is not the first time. So, inshallah, these are places which hold a very special feeling for Muslims in their hearts when they see what is happening, hear what is happening, etc. And it's just a matter of time, until these things come together, as Allah wills them to come together. And this will be opposed. This will be overcome. I mean, there was a time, if you can imagine it, where one extremist group called the Qaramita came and attacked the Kaaba, stole the Black Stone, took it away to eastern province in Saudi Arabia, and kept it there for 25 years.
Yeah.
And they massacred pilgrims there, threw their bodies in the well of Zamzam. It was devastation. But eventually that was overcome and the situation was brought back to normalcy for generations that came after them.
Yeah.
So this is a wake-up call. I mean, it's very painful to see the loss of life and destruction. I mean, it's just incredible.
It's
incredible. I've never seen anything like it. They even talk about, Berlin, after World War II, and, but this is far beyond that.
I have never in my life ever, back in the days when you see videos of, someone getting killed, it gives you nightmares for days. And to see it on this scale, it's quite
overwhelming.
It's quite overwhelming, and it's and how it's been justified, just a blatant denial of the reality there by the West and mainstream media, and it's you wonder, like it's hard to wrap your head around what's happening, because I mean wars are nasty, wars are but this is not a war, this is
genocide.
This is genocide.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's so I guess what I was trying to ask is, I just find it hard to accept that human beings alone are capable of this. It's like I'm always trying to find like another explanation, like another force behind it. Maybe like
Jinn.
Yeah, it's hard to reconcile with what human beings are capable of. Like, we read history about World War II, World War I, colonization, how, bloody it was, but I've never seen it. I just read about it. It's not the same now compared to like witnessing it. And me being a human being, having the human experience and interacting with other human beings, it's hard for me to accept that, my kind can do something like this. So I'm always trying to find, other explanations for why the actions that the designers are they're doing. It can't be normal. It cannot be just they're evil. You know, it's like a
But look at the time of Hitler, you know, the time of the Holocaust. You know, these were quote unquote normal people that got in behind the frenzy of Hitler and his call and justified what they did.
yeah. I'm always thinking, these are the people of, Gog and Magog. It cannot be like the normal human beings that I see every day. They cannot be capable of doing things like this. And I guess I do have to come to the term this is the reality. It's just we are capable of evil, and there's no explanation for it. It's quite a depressing world that we're in
Well,
currently.
you know, there's at the same time there is great good that's taking place that, you know, doesn't get popularized. It doesn't find a place.
Yeah.
You know, and
So I guess
that's Shaitan, you know, has been able to cover the good that's there. So now we're just being exposed to the evil.
yeah.
But this comes for a while, and with World War One, World War Two, you know, the evil that was involved in those two, then Vietnam and what happened there, and Afghanistan, and you know, so all kinds of stuff has happened in the past, is happening in the present, and will happen in the future. You know, whether it's the Mongols coming through and massacring people left and right to a level that people can hardly imagine today.
Yeah.
You know, or it's others to come, the Gog and the Magog. You know,
Yeah.
we said, you know,
Yeah.
they're gonna come and
Maybe
devastate
they've
us.
been around. We just are waiting for some, short people with swords and rampage in villages or cities. But societies have changed, and I think the concept of war is not the same concept that we read about, where you hear 50,000 soldiers marching with swords, and it's not swords anymore. I don't think that is the reality, unless something changes. But warfare has changed. It has become a machine now. So it's yeah, like you said, there's a lot of good that's happening, and we do need to find a way to amplify that, to show I believe there's a lot more good than there is evil. It's just not being put in the spotlight. One more question before I know I'm taking too much of your time. It's you've been around the world. How does Gambia compare to other countries in terms of Islamic practices, like the Islam that's here? Because we had someone recently, he said the Islam in Gambia is it's not heavy, it's light. People don't worry too much. It's always like God is good, it's going to be fine. And comparing to like other countries where there's, I don't even know how to put it, but what he was saying basically is there's a big emphasis on right and wrong. Like if you do wrong, there's almost like you're doomed. There's no redemption for you. But in Gambia, it's quite, different. According to him, I haven't traveled around, so this is a question that I would usually pose to someone like you. Like, how does it compare? Is it the same? Is there any differences that you've noticed?
Well, every country has its own peculiarities. You know, so it's hard to put the whole society in a box. There are always people who don't fit into that box. And that's everywhere you go. If we went back to the time when slavery was happening, then how did the society deal with that? And the evil that existed at that time, etc. how does it compare to the young people drowning in the Mediterranean from the Gambia? Every time I see the news and they're talking about so many people, 500 people, 400, 200 drowned in the Mediterranean, and from these countries, so and so and so and so, Gambia, is mentioned almost every single time, so that's a great evil, it's very sad, shameful. So in all societies, there are elements of good and elements of evil. And Gambia is no different in that regard. Gambian people are in general good people as far as my experiences go, and helpful and wishing good for others. And you have those who would exploit and
I guess that's
promote
normal
corruption,
in
etc.
society.
Yeah. I don't see it as being that different. I've been in the Philippines, Indonesia, Malaysia, in India, in East Africa, South America, and people are people. Human beings are similar everywhere, but each society has its own issues and problems, and it's just really to pick the area that you want to try to make a difference in, that you be a part of that change that we want to see, we want to happen, that we have to play our role in being a part of that change. And different societies require from us different efforts. There's no standard model that you need to, unless we say Islam is the standard to ensure good and minimize, protect our communities from evil, that Islam is the answer.
That's a good response. I guess to just end the conversation in a light manner. I know the Dr. Bilal scholar. How were you like as a young man, growing up? And you grew up in Canada or Jamaica?
Well, the greater part of growing up was in Canada.
In Canada. How were you like a young man, like a young man? Like, what are some of the things that you were into? What are some of the things that you were doing?
Well, in that period of time, in the 60s, I came into the awakening, of Black people in America, Pan-African thought, caught up in that. Before that, I lived for some years, about 5 years, in Malaysia, and that time, I could say I really wasn't conscious of, the movement in America to tackle the racism and oppression of Black people in America, and America's oppression of colored peoples in other parts of the world. So during that period of time, that was, I was into music. I was a musician, singer, and that was a portion of my life. And it continued when I went back to Canada to study in university. I majored in biochemistry. But during that period of time, I got caught up in communist propaganda. I swallowed it, and shifted from a nominal Christian into a hardcore communist. So went through that period, went back to the States and got linked up with the Black Panthers and Angela Davis, and that's another phase. And then found Islam finally in Toronto.
How old were you then?
I was 25.
When you found Islam?
Yeah.
Okay.
25.
That's in your prime.
24.
Still.
Yeah. So that took me through another path to eventually going to Medina to study. And then the rest is study and dawah and engage in teaching, education. Both my parents were educators. So that became an important part of my life, as a teacher in high school, junior high, Islamic studies teacher. Then teaching in universities in UAE, Ajman, and setting up departments of Islamic studies. I went to India, to southern India, Tamil region, city of Chennai. I lived there and set up Islamic University in Chennai, which is going till today. MashaAllah. Yeah, MashaAllah. That was the 2008.
Is it the IOU or is it different?
No, it's a different university. It's called the Preston International College. Yeah.
Okay.
Which,
that was something you started? Or?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I was asked to, I had proposed the idea of setting up the university, and the Indian brothers who I had proposed it to, who were engaged in big conferences, I had attended with them, and I advised them to set up an institution, because at that time there was no recognized, established Islamic institution in the country. There were institutions which were traditionally called Muslim institutions, but they were really not really Muslims. You were institution like Usmania College, for example, or university. The chancellor was a Hindu, and the vice chancellor was a Hindu.
That's interesting.
It's called, Usmania University. It was known as the Muslim University. So there are other examples of that.
Is it similar to IOU with the curriculums and?
No.
It's different.
Not at all.
Okay.
My curriculums for IOU, from the Islamic studies curriculum, which is what it started with, it's from Medina.
Okay.
From Medina, looking at what was done in Azhar and other universities. So it started off following that model, and then expanded and added other courses, etc., to it. But that's coming to present day. I hope I gave you.
That's an interesting one. There's a few things I was looking for, but it's okay. Maybe another time again. It's truly been an honor, Dr. Bilal. I appreciate you coming here.
My pleasure.
And we would close for now. Inshallah, whenever you're here again, we could always, have a chat again on the platform, because I do want to address the, like you said, Islamic cultures and cultural Islam. That is something I'm very passionate about, especially in the context of Gambia, because it's something that I've recognized can be problematic, especially in practice. And maybe this is something this is a way I would want to contribute to Islam, just to kind of help create a platform, invite, individuals like yourself to help, separate the two, make people aware. Some of the practices that we do, it's not Islamic, it's cultural.
Sure.
And
back in the 90s, I wrote a book which became the required reading for students in one of the universities in Ajman and also in Dubai. It was called the Clash of Civilizations. Based on the Clash of Civilizations, it dealt with the cultural Islam and Islamic culture.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is it online? Can someone get it?
It went out of print.
Oh.
Inshallah, in the near future, we'll try to reprint it again.
Okay. Then once that's available, you can just send us a link and we'll post it.
Inshallah.
Last one. This is from me. I know you're from Jamaica. Do you know any patois?
This is why I talk about.
Okay, that's done. Yeah, idea. Okay, that's very clear. So you do know patois. I mean, Gambia is there's the patois culture here, the Jamaican culture here, where people do listen to a lot of reggae music, dancehall music. So you have Gambians speaking like they're from Jamaica. So the fact that you're one of us, you're definitely one of us. It's been an honor, Dr. Bilal. Thank you so much for coming through. Thank you.